In a quiet corner of Maplewood Heights, where elm trees lined the sidewalks and neighbors still waved as they passed by, stood a grand old Victorian house, its wraparound porch and faded green shutters telling stories of another era. To the outside world, the house belonged to the perfect couple: Thomas Blake, a renowned architect admired for his precision and vision, and Elena, his radiant wife, who seemed to float through life like sunshine in a bottle. Thomas was the kind of man who built legacies with his hands and his mind. Tall, composed, with silver at his temples, and a jaw that rarely moved unless necessary. He was elegant but distant. His love measured not with words, but with blueprints and deadlines. His projects had graced architectural digests, and his colleagues marveled at his discipline. He was, in every sense of the word, respected. Elena, on the other hand, was alive. In all the places, Thomas wasn't. Laughter came easily to her, and so did charm. She had a magnetic quality. Whether at the grocery store or a dinner party, eyes found her. She thrived on interaction, on warmth, on being seen. Where Thomas was steel, Elena was flame. They had been married for 10 years, a decade that started with passion and travel, but slowly gave way to routines, home renovations, and the quiet ache of growing apart. Thomas worked longer hours. Elena spent more time alone. The space between them became a silent room neither of them dared to enter. When Thomas proposed restoring their aging Victorian, it felt, at least to him, like a gesture of love. For Elena, it felt like yet another project, another excuse for him to be absent. And so, when two builders showed up on a chilly Monday morning, Cody Jensen and Logan Price, both hired to overhaul the old wooden bones of the house, something shifted. Cody was rugged, with a voice like gravel and a grin that lingered. Logan was quieter, stoic, with a kind of coiled intensity beneath his silence. They were younger than Thomas, stronger, more present. Elena noticed, and they noticed her. It started innocently enough. She brought them lemonade, made polite conversation. But there was something electric in the air, something that passed between glances, in the pause between words. Elena felt wanted again, desired in a way Thomas hadn't shown in years. The flirtation wasn't planned. Neither was the first touch. But on a warm afternoon, when Thomas was out of town, and the air inside the house felt thick with tension, something happened upstairs. Something that would shatter the illusion of a perfect life forever. It wasn't supposed to happen again. That's what Elena told herself as she laid awake that night, the ceiling fan spinning above like some silent judge. Her skin still tingled from what had happened just hours earlier. Cody's rough hands, Logan's quiet intensity, the way they had looked at her, not like a wife, not like someone's property, but like a woman who was desired. The guilt came later, it always did, but so did the rush. And by the following week, that forbidden encounter had become a pattern, an intoxicating ritual that lived in the spaces where Thomas did not. Mornings were still polite smiles, coffee on the counter. But as soon as the front door clicked shut and Thomas drove away, the walls of the Victorian house closed in around Elena like a secret cocoon, wrapping her in danger and lust. Cody and Logan were careful, but Elena was bolder than she realized. She wore softer blouses. She lingered by the staircase when they passed. She laughed more, louder, longer. She brought wine one afternoon instead of lemonade. "You boys look like you've earned it," she said, placing 3 glasses on the kitchen table. They never asked her to stop, and she didn't want them to. By mid-September, Elena wasn't even hiding it well. She skipped yoga class just to be home during the renovations. She silenced her phone when Thomas called, and each time Cody pressed her against a wall or Logan whispered something into her ear, she told herself, he'll never find out. But Thomas had always been a man who noticed the things no one else did. That was his gift and his curse. When he returned from a 3-day conference in Boston, something felt off. The air in the house was too still. Elena was warm, smiling, but her eyes were darting. Left, right, anywhere but his. She excused herself too often, left rooms too quickly. Her phone was always face down. And the builders, they weren't quite the same either. Less eye contact, shorter conversations. Thomas said nothing. But his silence wasn't ignorance. It was gathering. He began watching. He noted when Elena's laughter changed pitch, or when she wore lipstick on days she didn't used to. He memorized her excuses, tracked her glances, and late one night, when Elena had stepped into the shower, he opened her phone. She had left it unlocked. The messages he found weren't just damning. They were devastating. Photos, pet names, plans for when he was out of town. Her words read like those of a stranger. Flirty, bold, needy. There were mentions of our bed, of things they'd done, of how they joked about him. Thomas scrolled until his hands shook. He didn't confront her that night, nor the next. Instead, he started keeping a journal. Thomas Blake didn't scream. He didn't shatter plates or confront Elena in a storm of rage. That would have been too easy, too emotional. Instead, he did what architects do best. He built. Not structures this time, but a plan. A blueprint for revenge, measured and meticulous. Every beam of pain, every nail of betrayal laid carefully into place. He began with small things, subtle. Elena wouldn't notice, at least not at first. He moved money from their joint accounts into a separate one under his name only. Then he had the home surveillance cameras checked and quietly replaced with a system he could control remotely. He reconnected with an old contact, a private investigator named Miles Connor, who owed him a favor from a messy legal case years back. Discreet, fast, and detailed, Thomas had said over the phone. "You'll have more than you want," Miles had replied. By the end of the week, Thomas had in his hands a manila envelope filled with undeniable truth. Photographs, message logs, timestamps, even a grainy video of Elena slipping into the master bedroom with Cody and Logan when she thought no one was watching. He studied the images as silence, face blank, fingers steady. Then he set them aside and stared out the window for a long time, watching the trees sway in the breeze. In his chest, something cold settled like frost. He didn't hate her, but he no longer loved her, and that was worse. The accident started not long after. First was the slick patch of floor at the top of the stairs. Elena slipped, twisting her ankle. Thomas was right there, rushing to help, concern painted on his face like a mask. Next, the brakes on her car gave out. She spun into a shallow ditch off Hollow Creek Road. No major injuries, just enough to make her heart race. Elena began to flinch at shadows. She kept looking over her shoulder. Logan and Cody noticed too. Her laughter wasn't the same anymore. Her hands trembled. She was distracted, paranoid. The affair had lost its thrill. Cody pulled back. Logan stopped texting late at night. They were builders, not accomplices to a crumbling woman's descent. They felt the temperature shifting in the house, the slow, creeping chill of something unspeakable settling in. Thomas watched it all unfold with surgical detachment. He didn't confront. He didn't accuse. He waited until one evening it was time. A Thursday night. Rain pattered against the windows. Elena came down for dinner and found the table set with their finest china. Candles flickered. Soft jazz played from the speaker tucked in the corner. Thomas greeted her with a calm smile. "I thought we deserved something nice." 10 years, he said, pulling out her chair. Elena hesitated, sensing something off, but she sat down anyway. Her eyes scanned the room, the shadows, the stillness. They ate in silence. Thomas made idle chatter about the renovations. Elena barely responded. Her wineglass trembled in her hand. When the plates were cleared, Thomas poured them each a second glass of wine. He raised his in a toast. "To us," he said. "To 10 years." She clinked it, her voice barely a whisper. Then Thomas said, almost softly, "I know, Elena." The glass paused midair. She blinked. "No, what?" He didn't smile, didn't blink. His voice was calm, terrifying in its stillness. "About them. About what's been happening in this house, in our bedroom." Her face drained of color. "Thomas, He lifted a hand to stop her, quiet, firm. "It doesn't matter anymore," he said, then reached into his coat pocket and placed a small vial on the table. "Do you know what this is?" She stared at it. Her mouth moved, but no sound came. "It's already in your wine," Thomas said simply. Elena's breath caught in her throat. The room spun slightly as she stared at the vial, sitting calmly between their wine glasses. Her heart pounded so violently it echoed in her ears. "You're lying," she whispered, barely audible. Thomas didn't move. His face was a portrait of calm. "Am I?" Her hands trembled as she slowly lowered her glass to the table. The color had drained from her face, and her voice cracked with terror. "Why would you do this? We could have... Thomas, we could have fixed this." "You didn't want to fix it," he replied coldly. "You wanted something different, something dangerous. And now, you have it." Elena pushed it back from the table. So suddenly, her chair screeched against the hardwood floor. She stumbled toward the kitchen sink, her breathing ragged, her mind reeling. She shoved 2 fingers down her throat, gagging, desperate to purge the poison from her system. But nothing came up, just bitter bile and panic. Behind her, Thomas stood up slowly, not with haste, not with anger, with intention. He watched her writhe. He heard the gasps, and still, his expression never changed. "Do you know what hurts the most?" he asked, voice almost soft, like a lullaby. "It's not that you betrayed me. It's that you thought I wouldn't notice." Elena turned towards him, face wet with tears and sweat. "Please, Thomas, please." She collapsed to the ground, her vision blurred, her body shook. The candlelight flickered like ghosts dancing on the walls. The poison, whatever it was, began its cruel work, locking her limbs and numbing her breath. She reached out toward him, one final plea. Thomas didn't take her hand. He just stood over her, watching as the woman he once loved slowly slipped into stillness. There was no fury in his eyes, no pleasure either, only emptiness. A chasm where love had once lived. When it was over, he walked upstairs, washed his hands, and changed his shirt. That should have been the end of it. But fate, it seemed, had other plans. Just as Thomas stepped into the foyer, he heard something. Footsteps on the porch. Then voices. It was Cody and Logan. They had returned to pick up tools they'd left behind, assuming Thomas would still be out of town. The door had been left unlocked. They walked in casually until they saw the scene in the dining room. The broken wine glass, Elena's body on the floor, and Thomas standing over her, eyes blank, hands in his pockets, like nothing had happened. For a moment, no one moved. Then Cody's voice cut through the silence. "What the hell is this?" Thomas didn't flinch. "You weren't supposed to see this," he said simply. Logan's eyes darted between Thomas and Elena. "Is she dead?" Thomas tilted his head slightly. "She made choices. Now she lives, or doesn't, with them." Cody stepped forward, fists clenched. "You killed her." "You helped," Thomas said, his tone eerily calm. "Both of you." The accusation struck like lightning. Logan's mouth opened, but no words came. Cody took another step. "We didn't mean—" "I don't care," Thomas interrupted. "But now, you have a choice." He walked to the door and locked it behind them. "You can walk away, pretend this never happened, or—" He trailed off. But the implication was clear. "Or you die too." For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then Cody lunged. The movement was sudden, instinctive, born from fear and rage. He didn't have a plan. He just knew that Elena was dead, and the man who killed her was standing calmly in front of him. Thomas sidestepped the charge with frightening precision, slamming his elbow into Cody's back as he passed. Cody crashed into the sideboard, knocking over a vase that shattered against the floor. Logan didn't hesitate. He grabbed a fireplace poker from the hearth and swung it with all his strength. The iron bar caught Thomas on the shoulder, sending him stumbling into a chair. But Thomas didn't fall. He rose slowly, blood trickling from a small gash near his collarbone. And then he smiled. That smile froze Logan in place. It wasn't joy. It was resolve. A man who had already decided how this would end. "You should have walked away," Thomas said. He grabbed the poker from Logan, twisting it out of his hands with terrifying ease, and swung it hard. Logan ducked just in time, the poker slamming into the wall, splintering the wood. Cody was back on his feet now, charging again, this time with a kitchen stool. He swung it wide, and the legs of the stool cracked against Thomas's side. Thomas let out a grunt, staggered, then retaliated with a sharp jab of the poker to Cody's thigh. Cody dropped to one knee, gasping. Logan tackled Thomas from behind, sending all three of them crashing to the ground in a tangle of limbs and fury. The struggle was brutal, raw, and messy. This wasn't a choreographed fight. It was desperate, animalistic. Furniture toppled, glass shattered. The dining room became a war zone. Thomas fought with a cold efficiency that made him seem almost inhuman. He didn't flail. He targeted. Every blow was measured, purposeful. A hit to the throat, an elbow to the ribs, a knee to the gut. Cody managed to land a punch that split Thomas's lip. Logan drove his fist into Thomas's ribs again and again until his knuckles bled. But Thomas kept coming, relentless, silent, calculating. And then, finally, a shift. Logan reached for the candlestick on the floor, the heavy brass one Elena had polished just last week. He swung with every ounce of his fear and fury, and it connected. The crack echoed through the room. Thomas froze. Blood poured down the side of his face. He staggered, blinked, and fell. Silence. Cody coughed and slumped against the wall, clutching his leg. Logan stood over Thomas's unmoving body, chest heaving, the candlestick still in his hand. They didn't speak. There was nothing to say. Logan dropped the candlestick with a dull thud. It rolled slightly across the hardwood floor, leaving a faint trail of blood in its path. For a moment, all he could hear was the pounding of his heart, echoing inside his skull like war drums. Cody was groaning, trying to crawl toward the door. Logan stumbled to his side and helped him up. They didn't speak. There were no words that would make sense of what had just happened. They needed to leave, but Logan hesitated. He looked at Elena's body again. The woman he once thought of as seductive and wild now looked small, still. Her eyes stared up at the ceiling, frozen in a silent scream. He didn't love her, not really, but he didn't hate her either. He felt hollow. "We can't just leave her like this," Cody muttered. Logan didn't answer. He walked into the kitchen and grabbed a roll of paper towels, wiping their fingerprints from everything they'd touched. The wine glasses, the candlestick, the doorknob. It was sloppy. It wouldn't be enough, but it was all they had time for. He helped Cody into the car, and they sped away from the house on Hollow Creek Drive, tires screaming against the pavement. They drove for hours, saying little. Each mile was heavier than the last. Eventually, they checked into a cheap motel off the interstate, one of those places with buzzing neon lights and a sour smell of mildew. Logan sat on the edge of the bed, staring at his hands. They were still stained red. Days passed, then weeks. Logan barely slept. Cody drank too much and said too little. They lived like ghosts, afraid to be seen, afraid to speak the truth. Every knock on the door sent their hearts into their throats. And then, one night, Logan's phone rang. Blocked number. He almost didn't answer, but something deep in his gut, curiosity, fear, guilt, made him pick it up. "Hello?" There was silence at first. Then a voice he had buried echoed through the line. "Did you really think it was over?" It was Thomas, low, calm, calculated, still alive. Logan's blood froze. "But you should have finished the job," Thomas said. "But I'll give you credit. You came close." The line went dead. Logan dropped the phone. He turned to Cody, who was pale, sweating, eyes wide. "He's here," Cody whispered, staring at the door. The knob turned. A soft laugh echoed from the hallway. Then the door creaked open, and Thomas stepped inside, blood still crusted in his hair, one eye swollen shut, but alive, very much alive, and in his hand, a blade, gleaming under the flickering motel light. "No more games," he said. The next morning, housekeeping at the motel made a grisly discovery. The room was a slaughterhouse. Blood on the walls, the ceiling, pooled on the carpet. The bodies of Cody Jensen and Logan Price lay twisted and broken, eyes wide with frozen terror. There were no signs of forced entry, no weapon found, just a single smudged handprint on the wall. Police searched for Thomas Blake for months. They never found him. Some believed he fled the country. Others whispered he was dead, buried somewhere deep in the woods behind the old Victorian house. But the truth was something no one dared say aloud, because in that house on Hollow Creek Drive, where silence now reigned, some said you could still hear footsteps at night. A man walking room to room, whispering, and if you listened closely, sometimes you could still hear the clink of glass, and a voice saying softly, "To 10 years, sometimes it's not the loudest betrayals that break us, it's the quiet ones. The ones that creep in between silence and routine, wearing the mask of normalcy until they shatter everything we thought we knew." The story of Thomas Blake is not just about infidelity or revenge. It's about neglect, erosion, and what happens when love is left unattended. A marriage that once held laughter and intimacy slowly withered, not from one great tragedy, but from 1,000 quiet disappointments. Elena wasn't evil. Thomas wasn't a monster, not at first. But hurt, left unspoken, can rot even the strongest hearts. And when pain festers in silence, it doesn't fade, it mutates. This story reminds us of a hard truth. Communication is the lifeline of every relationship. When we stop listening, stop seeing, stop choosing our partner every day, we open the door to distance and sometimes destruction. Trust doesn't die in one blow. It bleeds out slowly. And yet, another truth is even darker. Revenge never heals. Thomas sought justice, but what he found was emptiness. Because even when you destroy the person who hurt you, you're still left with the broken pieces inside. So if you're hurting, speak. If you're drifting, reach out. If you're angry, feel it, but don't let it consume you. Because in the end, silence kills more than words ever will.